We have added 4351 to our discussion, so we will take that up at this time. Ms. Justice, you want to ask to, I believe, Ms. Justice asked to discuss 4351. Is there a possibility we can get that on the board?
Yes, yeah, that's what I was hoping for. So I made copies, but not that many, and we need to look. If anybody wants a couple physical copies?
Okay.
I also have the two items that have been repeatedly requested to be added. I think at this point, if we're not familiar with this, I don't know where we've been for the last couple of years. But I'm going to pass these out. Sorry I didn't make enough copies, but this is what the request was. I'll take these down just for the changes, the short-term suspension. I had some back this way. All right. Policy Code 4351, short-term suspension. As we all know, we've had repeatedly over the last year, at least, if not longer, the Love Our Children group come in and just want to codify what we have been doing, and from what I understand, and this makes common sense, is what principals do, is that when a child, the young ones, or any child, actually, they better be doing this, a child is suspended from school, that they immediately, or as soon as possible, try to contact the parent or guardian. And then the child is suspended. But it's not codified anywhere. It's not written down to add that the administrator should be calling. Now, the point is that sometimes, and I know this, and you know this from experience, a lot of times, and you know this from experience, a lot of times you can't get hold of the parent or guardian, but making the attempt, and I know I worked in a school district where I worked in Durham Public Schools, and I was an administrator, and one of the things they did is they did have it codified. And that made a big difference as far as in your headspace, you knew you sure as heck better try to get hold of them. And so just the fact it was written down helps. Because you can get extremely busy, crazy stuff can go on, and who knows what, you know. But when it's codified, it just makes a bigger statement that you need to contact the parent. That's why I like to have this added.
Ms. Justice, just to let you know, Dr. in case you don't know, Dr. Warren and myself will be meeting with the with Mr. Badowitz tomorrow, and I guess some other folks. About this very thing. My only qualm, I mean, I've been a supporter of their group in a lot of ways. Over years, met with them repeatedly. I know that was not brought up the other day, but anyway, we'll get past that. Is the word that principals shall contact K-2 parents before a suspension termination is made. I mean, my thing before, if a child just beats the snot out of another child, so, I have to, as a principal, I would have to contact that parent first and say, is it okay, it's almost like the principal's being asked, is it okay with you, and that's my big thing, is, principals shall contact, what you're saying, I agree with 100%. Principals shall contact K-2 parents during a suspension, termination, or after the suspension, termination. But the word before is the only.
We can do attempt. Make sure that the attempt is definitely made. We can't. I mean, realistically, we know you can't get hold of the parents a lot of the times. That's one of the sad parts about the situation. But the attempt is made, and messages are left. Then at least you've gone as far out of the way as you possibly can. You're right, though. You've got a child over here that's really having them, they need counseling, they're working with, there's all the offices, and you can't get hold of the parent. So by the end of the day, you may not even have the parent respond. I mean, we know all of this. But the attempt really has to be made, and I think being codified really makes a difference.
Dr. Barnes, would you like to speak to what you...
Yeah, a couple of things. Julie, pull up the code of conduct where we change that language. First off, every good principal and every well-meaning adult in this district wants to minimize suspensions. Period. End story. My concern is that's balanced against the principal's ability to create a safe and effective learning environment. For me, what I put into the language of the code of conduct is that principals will have made contact with a parent before a student reaches the escalated phase of an out-of-school suspension. I'm going to just read it for you if you don't care. Because I wanted to respond to the concerns that they had. So I made it clear to the principals in a principal meeting and by email that minimizing suspensions is their role. And then I added to our range of student consequences that parent communication is embedded throughout the range of consequences as seen through the level corrective responses. It's the expectation that parents and school personnel work collaboratively to decrease the likelihood of challenging student behaviors. Unless there is a need for an emergency removal, parents can expect contact from school administration prior to reaching the response of a suspension from school. And that, my goal there is to embed the parents in collaborative nature with the principal before we reach an out-of-school suspension.
And that's excellent.
My concern is the word before. If you change that word to when, then I think that we're doing it.
And if I could add something else, and I was going to share this, so I don't know if you're reading tomorrow or not, but I think, honestly, as important as the wording that we have here, which is important, and I agree, if we change that to when, I'm 100% on board, is as a former administrator, and I think you would agree, I think as important, but probably almost more important, is when that child comes back to school, that we have that meeting. If we don't sit down with, as a principal, as an administrator, with that child on the way back in, okay, you know, like I say, I have had situations as a principal where parents says, well, my kid's, I'm going to be home and blah, blah, I can't take care of my child, all that kind of thing, which is, you know, that's neither here nor there. It's very important, obviously, but, you know, thinking through that whole process. But the other piece is when that child comes back, how are the behaviors going to change unless we counsel them? Unless we sit down with them, whether it be the administrator, whether it be the counselor, whether it be the administrator and the counselor, working with that child, you know, if a child with IEP, maybe having the EC teacher sitting in there. That's really as important as all this discussion, because, you know, I'll be honest, I was not that I was a good, you know, a perfect administrator, but I remember I had, at one of the schools I was at as an assistant principal, I actually made together, I made it an A team, and it was the students that got suspended on a regular basis. We met regularly, I took them out of class for just a little bit of time to try to help them figure out ways, you know, how not to get suspended, how not to get themselves in those kind of trouble. And I think that's as important as, you know, this kind of work. But, you know, I don't think that, you know, would you agree to, you know, the principal shall contact K-2 students when suspension is terminated?
Well, that is what we're asking. And here's, you know what, and we can discuss this further, but I agree totally, and this is what I try to do also, just like you. And we did have teams. And I mean, honestly, our biggest problem is lack of resources. We need to have some kind of system within the school so kids that have these chronic situations have possibly special settings that they can get the support they need, because obviously there's something going on with this child that needs this kind of support, and we don't have the resources right now to actually bring in the staff to be able to do that. But in lieu of that, I mean, of course, maybe we should visit this about having, you know, the parents need to come with the child when they return and have a meeting with the staff to set up a proper, you know, positive reentry plan, especially with a small child.
Also, I know that I sent, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Perry.
Could I just make a motion to amend the language, say principals shall attempt to contact parents as soon as possible when a suspension determination is made? And let's get rid of the K-2. This should be happening for all of our students, not just K-2.
Okay. You repeat that motion, please, sir?
Make amend the proposed language to say principals shall attempt to contact parents as soon as possible when a suspension determination is made.
Okay, is there a second?
Well, can we, I guess I'll second it so we can discuss. Okay. Okay. The reason that this is 4351 has to do with the age of the child, because I agree with you. I think it should be across the board for older children too. But this one specifically is for the younger kids. I mean, this is why we created this particular policy. So if we could do that right now, and then that, and then the reentry plan too. These are some things that we could be focusing on that could just make it better for our kids and their families so they can be successful.
This policy is for all children.
Oh, okay. Well, then excuse
There's language
me.
built in it for kids under 8.
Okay.
And bold is specific, but it's the whole gamut.
Oh, okay. Well, then I think, yeah, I like that. I second it. I agree.
Couple of things. I agree with Mr. Perry that anytime that we suspend a child out of school, there needs to be a contact with the parent. I would ask that it say an administrator rather than a principal, because sometimes assistant principals do a lot of that work as well. And in a high school, imagining a poor principal having to call everyone.
I would welcome a friendly amendment.
But administrator shall contact parents when a suspension determination is made. I think it's reasonable. Or attempt to.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion, and we're gonna go to administrator, you go with that? You go with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Principal or designee, that sounds smarter.
Yeah, could be.
Or designate, okay?
Correct.
Perfect, okay. I guess it could be what do they call dean of students?
Yeah, exactly. Or one of the guidance counselors who work with
Okay, and
parents.
again, this would have to go in front of the whole board, just make sure everybody understands, this would have to go in front of the whole board. We have a motion and a second to change the wording. Say it one more time, please, Mr. Perry.
Did we go with principal or their designee, or did we go administrators? I can't remember what you
I think
suggested.
principal or designee would be better.
Principals or the designee shall attempt to contact parents as soon as possible when a suspension determination is made.
Okay. All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Okay, so let me find the right spot. It's right here, 50, where am I? 50, help me out, 43.
4351, sorry.
Yeah, I should know that. Okay, and the last discussion we had was behavior.
Point of order.
Yes, sir?
We voted on my amendment, not that you have to vote for the main thing itself.
I don't think so, because that was the wording that because that policy was not up for review until you guys brought it up, so you made that motion, we voted that, we'll bring the policy to the whole board, as an amended policy.
Thank you.
Actually, it goes up here now. 51. All right, so that goes up there, and then we have behavior. Yes, ma'am?
The word before, do we have the word before there? Did we put that attempt before? Just to make sure.
It said as soon as possible. As soon as possible during, I didn't say after, I just said.
I would like to say before I mean, you may not be able to reach them, so you can have at least a discussion with the parent, maybe over the phone, before you make a determination. If you can't reach them, you can't, but before you make that determination.
That was not what was brought up, so
Yeah.
we can have further discussion, I guess.
Yes. Okay, so I would like to add an amendment to have the word before added.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second discussion.
Okay.
It's just a term, but that just, it makes it feel better because you know that you're calling the parents.
How about before, or in order to allay Dr. Kwan's concern, how about before or as soon as practically possible?
Well, yeah.
And again, that was my objection to the thing we could begin with, so, yeah, I'm going to let everybody know, I'm not going to be voting to amend, it will take 2/3, which is a majority. So we need to have that first, we'll vote to have a discussion of the amended discussion of 4351. So all in favor of having a further discussion of 4351, because the word before, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay, and we will not. Okay? I also vote no.
I just wanted to clarify something.
Yes.
Okay, so we can still take this to the board, and when we discuss this, this could be added at that time.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep, yep. So the last discussion topic we had today, I believe that came, I'm not sure. Mr. Perry, why don't you discuss his behavior reports?
Right. So this was another Love Our Children request, although I think it's in the issue, transparency is, one of the important things in my mind, and apparently we have not been getting these monthly reports like we used to as far as suspension data, behavioral data. From my understanding is at the time before is that we used to get student support services.
Well, this says to the board.
Right. So, I'm just discussing this. So, we used to get this. So,
The number of basically,
apparently we're not getting these now, at least not monthly anyway. Is that correct?
Ms. Varner?
So the Student Services Monthly Report was created for district administrators to view metrics. Before we had other avenues such as a Who Knew It dashboard, and before we used other dashboard methods. Now, I will say that report, because it's a collection of lots of different vital signs on the district, whether it's McKinney-Vento, numbers by school, FAFSA completion, dropout counts, bullying reports, threat assessments, that kind of thing. The amount of time it takes to create those, and with the staff reductions at the central office, the bandwidth isn't there to create that level of report. And in talking to our decision makers, our district level staff, they've said they have ways to get that in other ways rather than us creating one giant report that probably takes 20 to 30 hours a month to complete. So because that data is available other places, that report wasn't created. But that was not a report that was created to send updates to the board. Those monthly updates were provided interdepartmentally and among district leaders so they could support problem solving and school improvement efforts within schools.
I sent you guys, I think, a month ago, an update about the number of kindergarten, first, second grade students who've been suspended. It's also on the docket for our office hours this month to dig into them individually. My focus for this report was to find out from the schools, what are we doing differently for students who have received more than one out-of-school suspension to change their environment, and that's stuff I was going to bring to you in a smaller session, because I think that's where that gets more valuable. I do think that the number of suspensions you see are so rare enough that I can provide those to the board in an update in the month if you guys would like that information. That information, however, is so individualized in some cases. I'll just, off the top of my head, 16 of our elementary schools have had 0. So of those 9, several of those have only had 1 student. I am concerned about the level of specificity that has. That's why I would rather share those individual things with you in a way that doesn't necessarily cross over into notifying kids. I will tell you, and I know this is something we brought up before, I've got no problem with doing something like that. I question the need for a policy that requires me to do something that is a reasonable thing for you guys to ask for me to do for the board anyway, if that makes sense.
And I want to tell you that I just wanted to bring the topic up. I am not 100% certain we need a policy. One of the questions, although when it comes to aggregate data like this, that's non-student specific, doesn't, out our students or any of that sort of thing. I mean, it's not just us that should be seeing it. I mean, it's the public that should be seeing it. And one of the questions, I guess, is Mr. Benson is not here today, is that? Dawn. I mean, how difficult it would be to have some of this reporting available on our website?
and Mr. President, colleagues here, so would you
That would be a problem for us,
I think the only concern I'm hearing is that we don't want to make it, at this school, this child, you've had 3 people suspended, and in schools, a school of, 55 kids, all of a sudden we know who that child is.
Right. We do have a risk of personally identifiable information being accidentally released when you have a really small number in your population. For example, when we report out our accountability measures, our achievement data, we cannot report to the public a number under 10 with regard to achievement scores, like we made a level 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's under 10, it's a less than 10. And so these numbers are really small. And if you disaggregate them to the school level, and you're potentially, and especially if it's one, you're potentially outing the kid, so to say, by it, and the definition, and I didn't have it ready, but the definition of personally identifiable information is if there is anybody involved that could, that would reasonably know who that kid is, then you have released confidential information.
I think that this is a question to some extent about board governance. It's part of your job to ensure that I'm doing my job, right? I don't know where the public fits in with that specific instance. My job is to minimize suspensions, ensure safe environments for schools. You guys partnering with me in that makes sense to me. That being a public event, do we also publish grades? Do we also publish everyone's GPA? Do we, where does that level stop? If this was statistically relevant information, I would say maybe one thing, but we're seeing less than 20 students in the entire fall semester that have been affected. I am concerned that that is fairly specific data that I would rather have the board see. I don't see where it turns into a public event.
What I would recommend, what I'd like to recommend is, why don't we think about this, why don't we bring this back to our next policy meeting? Why don't we have a meeting with Dr. Barnes this week? We can hear what we need to hear, and if we, again, this is not a dead subject, we can bring it back to our next policy meeting, and that way there we can, if we need to have a further discussion, we have further discussion. Is that okay?
Sounds like a good idea, actually, more knowledge.
I have one of those
More knowledge.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, every once in a while. Is that okay? Okay. If everybody's good with that?